Welcome, everyone, to Three Side Sports Talk Mock Draft Edition. Excited to bring this episode to you. Before we get into our breakdown of the first round, let's talk about a few newsworthy items, including Alex Smith hanging up the cleats. He was a polarizing figure from the day he was drafted, but I got to say, from everything I saw over the last couple of days, it was nothing but complimentary from everyone he has played with, played under. He was the class act for sure. The Comeback Player of the Year award should get named after him after what he went through. But as a former 49er who went through some tough times, Jerry, your thoughts of Alex hanging it up?
Well, if there's one word to describe Alex Smith, it would be grit, which is somewhat surprising because I never would have thought that that's the word I'd use when he was the babyface kid the Niners drafted back in 2005. A Niners organization which honestly did him dirty. I mean, he had 7 offensive coordinators in his first 7 seasons and went through all sorts of inept head coaches until Jim Harbaugh came to town. But the dude just persevered through it all, from the struggles on the field to losing his job just because the organizations wanted a younger guy to obviously the horrific leg injury. I mean, he handled it all with such class. So as a fan, all I can say is that it was an honor watching Alex play. He definitely has my utmost respect, and I wish him nothing but the best in retirement.
Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, talk about the baby face, right? You look back at when he was drafted, he's unrecognizable to where he is today almost, right? I mean, and that was the big debate, right? Alex Smith or Aaron Rodgers? And what would have been if it was reversed? Who knows, right? But Alex Smith definitely thrown into the fire, like a really good example of going to a bad organization, right? With all the turmoil and the coaching, and then you don't really know what could have been really with Alex, right? Because he was just the injuries, right? Then he really hurt his shoulder and just all the different offensive coordinators. And then until Harbaugh finally came and, it just steadied the ship, I guess. Right. And then they eventually moved on. So, but watching him, rehab from that leg injury, I mean, just really bad. Like the determination to come back from that was 17 surgeries. Like that's even hard to imagine. 17 times you're going in for surgery prep. I mean, I can't even fathom that. Having had surgery once or twice, like that's insane. So I mean, to come back, I was actually a little surprised that he hung him up. I thought maybe he would stick around for another year or two, but best wishes to Alex.
So two things, and I'm sure they're high on most 49er fans' list, and that being his throw to Vernon Davis in the playoff game was phenomenal. But really his, I don't know what you want to call it, end around or quarterback sweep with Joe Staley leading the way that went in during that same game. I mean, that was Alex Smith all encompassing, and I'm excited to see him move on after. We forget he went 5-1 this year for the Redskins or the Washington football team. He went 5-1, and I'll give you a stat, and it's one of those things that we talk about, and it's going to come into play in this year's draft. And Jeff, you kind of mentioned it: a good quarterback or a good prospect going to a bad team and bad coaching, and what in unstable environment. From Jim Harbaugh's first year, when Alex Smith took over, or when Alex Smith and Jim Harbaugh got together, Alex Smith's record was 80, 36, and 1 up until today. Only 3 quarterbacks in the NFL had a better winning percentage than he did: Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers. So you talk about what can happen with a young prospect who just needs molding and needs coaching and needs to, can't be thrown into the fire with so many offensive coordinators. I think we kind of get a glimpse of what Alex could have been under Jim Harbaugh, what he was under Andy Reid, what he was as a veteran with Ron Rivera. And I mean, everyone will remember the tough times under Mike Nolan, but I think Alex, imparted and ended up with a solid 16-year career. It's not he'll always be compared to Aaron Rodgers, and that's probably going to be unfair to him. But I think Alex can rest easy knowing that his career is complete and was a positive for him, his family, and all the organizations he played for. Before Roger Goodell steps up to the microphone and announces to all those millions of fans in Cleveland, Ohio, that the draft is open, we're going to do our mock draft. So for those who weren't with us last week, Jerry, Jeff, and I drew straws to see who was going to pick first, second, third, and we're just going to go simply around the table, each taking a team. The first pick, held by the Jacksonville Jaguars, is also held by me. So I will be picking first, followed by Jerry, followed by Jeff, who has the 49ers pick. So that one will be interesting. Same rules apply in terms of all players are available. We're not allowing trades. We're simply going down the 1 through 32 list. Once a guy's taken, he's off the board. So no doubling up just because you think it's a better fit. Feel free to make your pick. Yeah. A couple of words of why you went that direction, and we will keep the draft moving. So to start off, hopefully the Jaguars don't take their full 15 minutes because they've had how many weeks to dissect this. The fans have already bought wedding gifts for Mr. Lawrence and his wife. He's already donated money to the community. So let's hope all those things come true. With the first selection, Jacksonville will take Trevor Lawrence.
All right.
Next up, the New York Jets.
So after going through the process and reviewing all the options, with the second pick of the 2021 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Justin Fields, quarterback, the Ohio State. That's right, baby. Everyone thought the Jets were going Zach Wilson, but Joe Douglas wants a quarterback who's proven that he can produce against the best competition on the biggest stage, and it doesn't get any bigger than taking down Clemson and the guy who's just taken before him in the college football playoffs. So here's your first curveball of the draft, boys. Fields, not Wilson, goes to the Jets.
It's interesting, and I'll just chime in with the fact that we talked about it last week. The Jets did go to Justin Fields' pro day. They did not go to Trey Lance's. So take that for what it's worth. That might have been them sealing the deal.
And didn't they trade Sam Darnold after Justin Fields' first pro day?
Oh, definitely after their first pro day. Yeah. So, all right. Trevor Lawrence, followed by Justin Fields, leads us to the San Francisco 49ers. Jeff, who are they?
Gary. With the curveball, man. Was not expecting that. I think you're just doing that just to throw everything off, right? I don't know if that's really gonna happen, but that'd be great, right? Because the Jets, being the Jets, if you want to go ahead and take Justin Fields, sure. Because now the San Francisco 49ers will select my boy, the Mormon Mahomes, Zach Wilson.
So for the first time in a long time, the NFL draft will start with 3 quarterbacks, leading us to my pick with the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons are a prime trade-out candidate, especially if it falls this direction. One of the 4, we'll call them elite athlete quarterbacks, will be left. So we're talking about Denver, we're talking about New England, and we're even talking about Carolina a little bit, even though they traded for Darnold, that the Falcons might be looking to drop down, still secure a top 10 pick. But I think they're tied to Matt Ryan too much over the next 2 years. I think they're going to take probably the best player in the draft. They're going to take Kyle Pitts out of Florida.
All right. So it's my turn with the Cincinnati Bengals on the clock. And like you were saying earlier, I think that the Falcons are actually either going to take Trey Lance for themselves to kind of sort of pave the way for the future, or someone's trading up like Washington or Denver to grab Lance in the number 4 slot. But since Pitts is now unavailable, because I could see Pitts also going to Cincy if he were. Either way, it's all about surrounding Joe Burrow with more support. And while it's tempting to reunite Burrow with his former pass-catching teammate, Jamar Chase, I think Cincinnati will choose to bolster their offensive line instead. So, with the 5th pick of the 2021 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Penei Sewell, offensive tackle out of Oregon.
And again, we're talking about probably an elite tackle who might, again, in 5 years, you're going to look at this, and if he turns into Walter Jones or Jonathan Ogden, the Bengals will have, at least for a year, pushed aside their bumbling Bungles moniker and taken a legit NFL star. So moving on to number 6, the Miami Dolphins, who are somewhat tied to the Niners because of all the trading that went on. So did Miami get the guy that they wanted, even though they got out of the 3rd position? Jeff, your selection.
Yeah, I would say my first Miami selection today, a little surprised Jerry went that route, because I thought for sure they wouldn't, especially with their offseason for the Bengals, signing Reef. But therefore that leaves at number 6 the availability for the Miami Dolphins of taking Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase. Interesting that we've gone this far, not even a consideration for a defensive player. It's all on the offensive side of the ball. As we move to number 7, the Detroit Lions are not going to break that streak. They are going to also go with a wideout from Alabama, Jalen Waddle.
Interesting.
Is it interesting? What makes that interesting?
Does Jalen Waddle? Well, it makes a lot of sense because who do they have catching passes in Detroit right now? Probably not many options. But I guess I just think about the guys that are in charge. Your Chris Spielmans, your Dan Campbells, and not sure Jalen Waddle, resembles the biting the kneecap off type player. So that's why I made the interesting comment. And
I was wondering if that's where you were going, because I also struggled with the Detroit pick because I was looking for a blue collar, like if there was a Ndamukong Suh, if there was just a defensive trench eater that could make a difference, or there was a legit Bosa who could come off the edge, I would have definitely gone that way because it does fit the profile of Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. I just do not see a legit defender right now who can make an impact. And by going wide receiver, you're at least going with a position of need and, hopefully surrounding Jared Goff with more weapons so he can ultimately succeed. So.
But if the Falcons don't trade out of their pick at number 4, I could definitely see the Lions being that spot where they trade down and having somebody jump up and grabbing Trey Lance, because Lance is still on the board. And frankly, I don't think that he will get past that number 7 slot with the Lions in reality.
Well, I agree. I think there will be a trade up option for him, but we're playing by rules. So
no, I understand, which is why it makes it very interesting now.
Right.
Now that the Carolina Panthers are on the clock.
Definitely be some trades.
Because I'm sure they would like themselves a little bit of this Trey Lance action, but they also did just trade for Sam Darnold, and they do need an offensive tackle. So, this is tough. I guess I will say that with the 8th pick, because they'll need to protect Sam Darnold, they'll go ahead and fortify that offensive line. So the Carolina Panthers will select Rashawn Slater, tackle, Northwestern.
It will be interesting to see what Carolina does if this falls similar. And even if Trey Lance goes in the previous, say, 3 picks and someone like Waddle is available, or, Devontae Smith is available, Pitts and Chase, are taken in this exercise. But what happens if they're available? Wouldn't Matt Rule be drooling over the opportunity to pair Sam Darnold and Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore with another just big time receiver. So that will be interesting.
Yep, it would be very tempting. But then again, they've had kind of revolving door at their tackle spot. Like I think every year they've had a different guy man that spot. So if they could get a franchise tackle, I think they couldn't pass that up. But it, like you said, it would definitely be tempting to take a skill guy. That's for sure.
At number 9, the Denver Broncos are on the clock.
Yeah, and I definitely think back to what we've already mentioned, there's definitely going to be some trades. Like already, like I could see 2 or 3 up to this point happening. So definitely going to be some trades happening. But the way we're working it out right now, it's falling pretty good for the Denver Broncos at number 9, and they're able to select quarterback out of North Dakota State, Trey Lance.
I think the Broncos would, the Broncos could not get the card up there fast enough should Trey Lance be available on the board.
Yes.
So that gets us to number 10 and America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. This is actually a consideration where you might start seeing that first defender come off the board. I was actually targeting Rashawn Slater for the Cowboys as their offensive line has kind of diminished over the last couple of years. That's what was such a strength for them 2, 3, 4 years ago, when they had Dak, when they had Zeke, and the offensive line was just so formidable. And that's kind of fallen by the wayside. So if a guy like Slater was to fall to them, I could definitely see them making that move. As it is, the offensive linemen worthy of the top 10 pick probably aren't there. And the defensive side of the ball does need to be addressed. So with that said, the Dallas Cowboys are going to go to probably the least sexy position, and they're going to go defensive line. They're going to go Christian Barmore, defensive lineman out of Alabama.
Wow. That's, I think, the most shocking pick thus far.
Yes, I think so.
Now, why did you go Christian Barmore?
Well, I mean, part of it had to do with need. You're talking about a defense who, I considered a number of obviously defensive players. I considered Patrick Surtain, considered J.C. Horn. I don't see a linebacker right now sitting at 10. Maybe the guy from Notre Dame could jump up there, but top 10, that's kind of steep. And you're talking about the Cowboys having to rebuild the defensive side of the ball. And I think you're going to start with an explosive 3 technique, a guy you can put in there and collapse the pocket. You're talking about the NFC East. There isn't a runaway winner. And right now you're talking about a team in the Cowboys that just needs to rebuild their foundation pieces. They have the sexy picks. They got Dak. They got, Zeke. You got guys on the outside. You don't have anybody to protect, and you don't have anyone to rush the passer. And looking at this, I just think you start building inside out.
So when I think of Jerry Jones, I think he likes the splashy names. So I thought you were definitely going Patrick Surtain. So that's all.
Yeah, he was considered. He was absolutely considered.
All right. So New York Giants are now on the clock, and they could go in a lot of directions here. O-line, cornerback, edge rusher. And I guess I figured because James Bradbury can't cover everyone, Dave Gettleman decides to get him some help by taking Patrick Surtain, cornerback, Alabama.
Interesting pick. Moving over to the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, it's nice that the NFC East was so terrible that they lined all 3 picks up like that. You're just going Cowboys, Giants, Eagles. So.
Yes, the Philadelphia Eagles, like you said, Jerry, a lot of needs there, right? Like every team, you see these needs: edge, corner, receiver, interior offensive lineman, right? The Eagles are in that mix as well. I was thinking about a couple different directions here, but I think they've been depleted in their wide receiver category. So look who's still there. Heisman Trophy winner, Devontae Smith.
Boom.
Boom.
The Los Angeles Chargers now on the clock with pick number 13. As I looked at this pick, again, I started seeing position needs that didn't fit what I thought was available. I saw offensive tackle, but you're talking about Sewell and Slater already being gone. You're seeing tight end, and outside of Pitts, I don't see a tight end worthy of going in the first round. Wide receiver is also a need, but again, you're talking about the main ones going off the board. So that kind of flipped me over to cornerback and defensive tackle. And as I went through this, I noticed that it was just impossible to shoehorn the right guy into that spot. However, I did want to go reach a little bit because J.C. Horn, the cornerback out of South Carolina, is getting a lot of buzz. You're talking about the son of an NFLer, and the Chargers are going to fill that need. J.C. Horn, cornerback, South Carolina.
Good player. I don't know if that's necessarily a reach. I would say that Justin Herbert might not be super thrilled because I think they need an offensive tackle.
Yes, no, absolutely.
So you didn't consider Christian Darrisaw there, huh?
No. I'll tell you, and it's probably it's a bias on my part. The very few clips and things that I saw on him, he looked out of place. He looked matchup dependent as a guy who could battle the rusher straight on and on the inside. Outside, he looked slow. At least to me, he could not kick out. And when you're talking about a spread offense or an offense that's going to need, they're not going to keep their tight end in. They don't run that Shanahan. We're keeping at least a fullback, maybe a tight end in there. You're putting your tackles out on a corner. So if you're going to draft a tackle, that it better be either an elite tackle or a guy who can plug and play with some versatility.
All right. So the Minnesota Vikings now on the clock. Huh. Are they tempted to get their next version of Kirk Cousins with Mac Jones still on the board?
Well, that's it. That's going to, obviously, if we were Chris Berman and whoever's going to be on the set for ESPN, and this will start to be the discussion point of where is Mac Jones going to fall? Where, all the time he was supposed to go number 3. Where is he going to go? So I'm sure every team is now going to be evaluated to, is Mac Jones going to go here?
All right. So everyone's linked an edge rusher to the Vikings throughout the draft process. So I guess I too will go edge rusher. So with the 14th selection of the 2021 NFL draft, the Minnesota Vikings will select Kwity Paye, defensive end, Michigan.
Cool.
Like it.
Yeah, I don't know if it seems like all the mocks I looked at had the Vikings taking like a lineman or something. No,
Offensive lineman.
It depends. Totally depends, I guess. There's
I
so
mean,
many.
yeah,
of them
so
out
they
there.
could have. I could have gone with Todd's favorite Christian Darrisaw there, but he just convinced me not to take him with his bad feet. So,
Well,
yeah. What's? Go ahead.
I got to say the New England Patriots are now on the clock. They're at number 15. They've been linked to taking a quarterback. They've been linked to a possible trade up. Did Bill Belichick just sit pat and going to get his next Tom Brady? Jeff, you're on the clock.
Yeah, the New England Patriots, number 15. I think so far this has been for me been kind of what's the word, scratch or chalk? No, chalk, right? Like other than like Jerry throwing the wrench in there with Fields, but then I just reached back and just took Wilson. But otherwise, these guys all seem to be falling. That's why it's hard to say like falling perfectly, I guess. But it's hard to say that that's going to happen that way with all these trades that are going to happen. So yeah, at 15, I'm going to have to say the New England Patriots then are going to take Mac Jones right there.
Interesting. So Is
and
that
get their quarterback of the future, their next Tom Brady, and he can sit behind Cam until Cam gets hurt in week 6.
so? Let me ask you: Do you think Belichick would take Jones there if he knew he was going to be there, opposed to trying to trade up? Like if you told Bill he could stay pat at 15 and get Jones, or he could trade, his first this year and his first next year and get Trey Lance, in our scenario, he falls a little bit farther. What do you guys think Bill would do?
It's really hard to say without knowing without being able to trade, because I think they may have to, assuming like if the Broncos do it as well, they trade up, then he's going to have to trade at that point.
I don't think I see Bill Belichick in real life taking a quarterback and with the first round pick, personally.
Yeah, but if you told me Bill Belichick spent $500 million in free agency, I would have said, "Nah, that's not the way he rolls." But right. I think since Tommy left, Bill's had to reevaluate his strategy on roster building and how to do this.
I just feel that
I was thinking that too, Jerry. Like I wasn't going to go that route, but there's Mac Jones sitting there. So
yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense in this particular scenario. But in this particular scenario, if the Niners really wanted Mac Jones, they'd be kicking themselves because they could have had him at 12.
Right.
You're right. If they actually wanted Mac Jones, for sure, he would be.
No, for me, in real life, I almost feel like the Patriots are just following the Niners around because they're hoping that they're gonna give and just send them Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, I think that's what they're gonna do. Like, so what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You gonna trade?
What are you gonna do? Second to third? What do you want?
I know. What's it gonna take? Look, I'm gonna follow you everywhere. You're not gonna be able to shake us.
Yeah.
All right, Todd, your turn.
We are halfway through the draft. We moved to number 16. An NFC West opponent, the Arizona Cardinals. You're talking about a guy or a team who is built a nice offense with Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. They went out and signed some running backs to hopefully run the ball. But the same thing that has bothered the Cardinals, forever is their lack of ability to shut down a defense. We saw it when the Niners played the Cardinals this past year. The Cardinals just blew every opportunity to shut down the Niners on multiple drives to get the ball back, and they just could not do it. It's tempting to try and force a cornerback like Greg Newsome, who I really like out of Northwestern. But here's where I think Jeremiah Owusu-Cormier comes into play. He's going to be the speed linebacker that the Cardinals can put in place. He's their Kyler Murray on defense. He's going to be able to go sideline to sideline, and he might be able to make enough plays at the right time to force other teams to turn the ball over. So we're going to give Jeremiah Owusu-Cormier to the Arizona Cardinals, which hurts me as a Niner fan because I think that's actually a really good pick.
So I'm surprised you went with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah with Micah Parsons still available.
Yeah, I have those guys kind of ranked in my head, very similar. I actually see Owusu as a faster sideline to see. I see him as Navarro Bowman. I see Micah Parsons, maybe a poor man's Patrick Willis, a guy he's going to make plays. He's going to make plays, but is he going to go sideline to sideline as quickly? We'll see.
All right. So now the Las Vegas Raiders are on the clock, and they could go offensive line after parting ways with so many of their mainstays up front, but they also have to bolster that defense. And interestingly enough, I thought Micah Parsons would be off the board, and I had them taking Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah for all the reasons Todd just stated. But since Micah Parsons is on the board, that's who the Raiders will be
the Raiders,
linebacker out of Penn State.
the Raiders have kind of gotten away from their Al Davis roots a little bit. They no longer just look at the 40 times and take the fastest guy on the board. But Micah Parsons is pretty good. And although if they go this direction, I got to think Mike Mayock has tied Gruden into his chair and duct taped his mouth because everything John Gruden does is built around the offense. Now, I don't see any offensive guy that he would be banging the table for. So, and he knows his defense needs to improve. So this might be Mike Mayock's biggest challenge as to there's legit stars on defense available. John, we need to go this direction.
Yeah, that was interesting the last couple picks because even before that at 15, if it wasn't Jones, I was going to go probably one of those linebackers for the Patriots. They love their linebackers. So maybe one of those guys wouldn't have been there. And then on to the next, two for you guys, the Cardinals and the Raiders. I thought same thing for the Raiders. They got to go defense, right? They have to go defense on that. So linebacker would be perfect for them. And yeah, Gruden needs to just, take that. So now to number 18, my second choice for my Miami Dolphins.
And just to remind everyone, with your first pick, you took Jamar Chase. So the Dolphins have picked up kind of their elite wideout. And again, number 18 pick, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I'm tempted to go a different direction. Not to give it away, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna go edge, and I'm gonna go with Azeez Ojulari to bolster their edge and defensive presence for the Dolphins.
I will say, on a side note, Jerry and I, over the past, how long, 6-7 years, we've gone through our own draft exercise where we've gone through the draft process and always drafted right in the middle of each round. So inevitably I start looking at guys who I think are going to be late first rounders. So I would take, this would have been my player. If Jerry, if we were continuing our exercise, this would have been my player because I see him as he's going to be, in my opinion, an impact player from day one. And if you're going to the Dolphins, right now they're improving as an organization. You talk about them being a quality organization. Brian Flores is a good coach. This might be a really nice fit for him. And I was waiting for that guy to fall to one of my picks where it would be just a natural dovetail fit, and it just wasn't going to happen. But I really like that pick. Yeah. Number 19, WFT, the Washington Football Team. Again, we've talked about trade up, trade down. We were talking about Washington possibly being it in this scenario. If Trey Lance was available and we saw the Patriots trade up for Trey Lance, you might see the Washington team look to possibly trade up into that 15 range if they wanted to get Mac Jones. Their quarterback's not there. Their wide receiver might be there. And I'm going to have to do it, even though I didn't like it. And I'm going to have to take Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle, out of Virginia Tech. Because right now, as you start looking at this team, if you're going to play Kyle Allen or you're going to make a move for a quarterback, you got to protect him. We've seen what happens when teams don't protect their quarterback. I mean, you're all but calling it the David Carr syndrome. You're talking about a guy with immense talent and gets put behind a Swiss cheese offensive line, and it never results positive. So Christian Darrisaw, the tackle, will be going to Washington, which is probably a better fit as a more conservative offense in Ron Rivera, that they won't be asked to run the spread and have him on the island as much.
All right.
The Chicago Bears, number 20.
So the Bears face Kyle Fuller at cornerback. So with their pick, they've got a couple of interesting prospects still on the board. they're gonna take a swing. They're gonna take a big swing and take Caleb Farley. Tech. Some people have him rated as potentially the number 1 cornerback in this draft, if not for some injury issues.
Back-to-back Va Tech players, so that's interesting in itself. But I agree, Caleb Farley is someone who 3 months ago was talked about right up there with Patrick Surtain as possibly one of the first corner coming off the board. He opted out of the college football season this past year, so by the time he gets on the field, it's going to be almost 500 plus days that he's gone without playing in a football game, plus his back injury, which they say was outpatient procedure and he's going to be fine for training camp. But those are the types of players that if they get pushed down the draft board, it's worth it to take a swing by the Chicago Bears, because you're talking about a guy who probably, if healthy, is a top 10 talent, an 8 to 12 talent, and he slides down to 20. At that point, you've got to look for those guys with the upside and the gems in the first round. And I think Caleb Farley is going to be one of those guys that everyone's watching on draft night to see, does he fall? And if so, how far? Yeah. Indianapolis, the Colts.
Yeah, the Indianapolis Colts at pick 21. This is the part of the draft I was kind of dreading with the Colts. I couldn't figure out who to go with the Colts. I don't think they need a guy like Vera Tucker in the interior. They need a tackle, but the great tackles aren't necessarily there. I don't know if Vera Tucker can play tackle. I know he played some, but I don't know if that's what they want to go with at that spot. And I'm not sure other positions of need.
Are they kicking? Are they kicking Nelson out to tackle? Do you know if they're really going to consider that?
I've not heard. I would doubt it. But see, part of the problem with that is, so I don't know who all is out there, but I saw at least Villanueva is still out there as a free agent. So to me, it seems like it'd make more sense for him, go get like a guy like Villanueva and then go a different route, a totally different position in the first round. But if they have to pick there, and I don't, I'm not sure, like there's not the best receiver there at that spot. So I think I'm going to have to go with Tevin Jenkins, tackle, Oklahoma State.
Ooh.
That's interesting.
That was a tough
one. I just saw before we started podcasting earlier today that Jim Irsay did say that, and take it for what it's worth, sometimes Irsay is off his rocker and sometimes he's such a straight shooter you don't know if he's so honest, you don't know, but he said that they are investigating offensive tackles in order to keep Quentin Nelson at guard. So it's I would imagine
that would make more sense.
I would imagine it's not their primary objective to kick out Nelson. I think it's more of it would be out of necessity. But I mean, you're talking about an all-pro, all-NFL guard since he basically came into the league, and kicking him out to a different position. You would hope they would try to address that. So, but Tevin Jenkins, Oklahoma State, serves the need, as we'll say. So. Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is a team that is interesting because they were such a good regular season team. Tannehill played really well. They got into the playoffs and they couldn't stop anybody. They got Derrick Henry, which you can hand off to him all day long and your offense is going to be pretty competent. And the defense let them down. Sitting where they are, the defense looks like it's got to go safety. It's got to go corner. I really like the player. I'm not thrilled with the fit, but Greg Newsome out of Northwestern, the cornerback, is too enticing for the Titans to pass up. So Greg Newsome, cornerback out of Northwestern to the Tennessee Titans.
Right.
The New York Jets with their second pick of the draft.
First of all, is it interesting that Jeff drafted for the Dolphins both times, and now I'm drafting for the Jets both times.
I didn't even notice that until I started going through the mock to see who had which teams, and knowing that a couple teams had number one. And I was thinking, oh, well, I got to pay attention, because if I have one of those second picks, I got to try and match up who you guys might have taken with their first picks, only to find out doesn't matter. You guys both landed, those picks, which, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So how are the Jets going to support their new franchise quarterback, Justin Fields? Let's add a stud running back. With the 23rd pick of the draft, the Jets select Najee Harris, running back, Alabama.
I think this is I think it's a great pick, first of all. And I also think this is starting to be the place where you'll see teams in the early second round who might be eyeing somebody trade up into the first round. This might be the selection area that Larry Krueger talked about. If you're going to go get Harris, this is where you got to target. And the Jets might be willing to make that move, because they got their quarterback. So can they accumulate a couple more draft picks and move around the board? I think that might be a trade option, but you're going to start seeing those guys who are late first round gems start coming off the board. And if this falls this way, Jets fans cannot complain. They cannot boo. They have to get over the Kyle Brady draft picks of 15, 20 years ago. You're going Justin Fields and you're going Najee Harris, big time players. So interesting facts there. Jeff, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, the Steelers, like I was mentioning with the Colts, so they have not signed Villanueva. They may need a tackle. But again, what tackle would I want to take there? And the Steelers, kind of like the Patriots, they love their linebackers, right? There's still some pretty good linebackers on the board. Do I go that route, or do we go specialist type of route? I think at this point, I see a name still on the board there. Not sure how much they need it, but we're going to go ahead and go with Zaven Collins off the edge opposite TJ Watt.
I like it. I actually think that Collins might get drafted a little bit earlier. I think he's the type of player who is going to make plays and is in those middle, that 15 to 20 round. People are going to start eyeing linebacker out of Tulsa.
Go that way.
And as we just talked about, you guys each had 2 picks. Well, it's only fair that I get 2 picks. So the Jacksonville Jaguars, after having Trevor Lawrence, which was the absolute no-brainer pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars, are going to come this way. It's going to be interesting in this pick because we know who Urban Meyer is. Urban Meyer is a guy who's coming from college, and he likes speed. He likes guys off the edge. He likes playmakers. Combine that with their general manager, Trent Baalke, who's a grinder. He's, he finds the guys in the trenches that, he finds those guys appealing. So it'll be interesting to see just what happens between these two. I will say there are a few guys on the list that I am considering, but I'm going to say that, I'm tempted to go edge rusher, but I think you got to protect the franchise. I think you're going Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC to the Jaguars. It's not as sexy as Trevor Lawrence and his flowing locks coming with the number 1 pick, but I think it's a better football move to make sure he's protected. Oh, I was really, really hoping Jeff was going to have the Cleveland Browns pick as we went through this. Just
for fun. Or the Jets, too bad.
Yeah, he was going to have the Jets and the Browns, but the Cleveland Browns drafting at number 26, probably as low in the first round as they've picked in a long time. Jerry, Who are the Cleveland Browns going to invite to join their team?
So after Larry Ogunjobi left via free agency and Sheldon Richardson was released, I thought there was no chance that I couldn't get Christian Barmore at this pick.
Right, yeah.
But then I guess lo and behold, the Cowboys swooped in and took him many picks earlier. So at this point, it might be a little early. I mean, to take Levi Onwuzurike, is that how you pronounce his name, out of Washington? The D tackle out of Washington.
Yeah.
So I will go with, is it Jamin Davis, linebacker?
Interesting. Okay.
Kentucky.
Yeah. You're talking Jamin Davis, the linebacker out of Kentucky. You're talking about another guy who, is built for speed, which I guess is the new trend. Is you get the really big guys up front, and you get I don't even know. These guys might have been edge rushers before. Now they're linebackers. But Jamin Davis, the linebacker out of Kentucky. I like it. Baltimore Ravens.
At number 27, Baltimore Ravens. They like their linebackers also, but do they need linebackers? I'm not so sure. I keep hearing they need a wide receiver, but what wide receiver would you take here? Such a tough exercise, isn't it? I think I'm gonna not go wide receiver, and I'm gonna go with a different position, maybe a new Ed Reed or something. We'll go with Trevin Moehrig, safety out of TCU.
I was wondering if we were going to get through the first round without a safety, as the safety position seems to be, if not devalued, just not as plentiful in this draft. But you're right. The Ravens have been talking wide receiver all offseason. So it's clearly not going to be a wide receiver. That's the way to go. So Trevor Moehrig, the safety out of TCU, going to Baltimore, bringing up the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints, and I'll echo what you guys have talked about, is they're looking for a receiver. And I am actually going to go in that direction. And there's two guys that I'm considering, and it's 6 of one, half dozen another, in my opinion, because you're going with the really speed guy, you're going guy with a little size, but Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver out of Minnesota, will be the pick for the New Orleans Saints, giving whomever the quarterback might be, Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, somebody new, another weapon on the outside. So we will go Rashad Bateman, wide receiver, Minnesota.
All right.
Yes.
Green Bay on the clock at number 29. I don't think the powers that be will actually do this, because this would placate Aaron Rodgers. But I am going to do Aaron Rodgers a favor and give him that wide receiver. And that wide receiver would be Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss.
That was when I mentioned on the Saints pick that there were two guys that I was debating about. That was the other guy. So I am right in lockstep with about the value that these wide receivers are falling into. So and you're right. I think placating Aaron Rodgers probably a year too late, but let's try and make him happy at some point before he retires. So good job, Green Bay. The Buffalo Bills are on the clock.
Interesting. And when I was going through this exercise, I thought the Bills maybe need some help on the edge, but most of these edge guys seem to be gone, except for one name. But I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Not sure what all, just maybe give Allen some more weapons. And I'm going to go with Travis Etienne, running back out of Clemson.
That's a good pick. Josh Allen can't do it all by himself.
Right. They may have running backs, but I think this gives them just another weapon, another dynamic option.
I think it's a really good pick. I think you're looking at, you set the over under on running backs going in the first round at about 1.5, because you start getting down here and you're not quite sure if one of these guys is going to be available. But and when you're drafting this low in the first round, you obviously had a really good season. So it's almost a case of the rich getting richer. You're talking about Josh Allen, an MVP candidate, and taking his team to the playoffs. And now what's he going to do with another weapon, another, a guy to be able to get to the outside, to move the chain. So yeah, that's a really nice pick. The Kansas City Chiefs, your Super Bowl losers, on the clock at number 31. As I look at the Chiefs, I'm seeing no offensive linemen. At least no returning Kansas City offensive linemen. They did go out into free agency and try and rectify that situation, but look, we all saw the Super Bowl. We saw, Jerry, you mentioned it, before we started the mock draft, Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes running for his life. He was just absolutely inundated by that Buccaneers defensive line. And in part because their offensive tackles were hurt. Well, now their offensive tackles not only are hurt, or cut. So you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to look at the offensive line, and I'm going to stretch it a little bit. I'm going Samuel Cosmi, the tackle out of Texas. It's, again, the Chiefs probably have gotten real comfortable getting, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the very last pick to be, a nice offensive weapon. But if you don't have, if Mahomes doesn't have the time, he's not going to be able to be optimized. So let's get him some protection. And winding up the mock draft, pick number 32, the Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who is your pick?
Yeah. So, they don't, I think most of their free agents came back. Teams pretty much settled, but, I guess they could use a little bit more depth on that pass rush, just because Jason Pierre-Paul is getting a little long in the tooth. And I know they just re-signed, oh my gosh, help me out with the name. Shaq Barrett. Yes, Shaq Barrett. But I still think they can use another pass rusher. Could it be Jason Owe? Could it be Carlos Boogie Basham? Possibly. But I'm going to go with Gregory Rousseau. Greg Rousseau, defensive end out of Miami.
Yeah, and I would just add that that's a luxury, right, for the Bucs. If they could add one of these guys, one of these edge guys at that point, I mean, because I think if one of those guys could slip to the Niners in the second round, that'd be awesome, right? Whether it's Phillips or Rousseau you just mentioned, or one of these other guys, like that'd be a pretty good steal.
And that concludes the first round mock draft. I think we all agree that there will be trading kind of in that, especially in that 8 to 14 range, especially if you're seeing a Trey Lance start to slide. Somebody's going to jump up there. Somebody might jump up there for the last, of the legit pass catchers when you're talking about Devontae Smith, Waddle, and Jamar Chase. So there definitely will be some trade actions. However, as we went through this, you start to see fits in the beginning and you start to see fits at the end. Now, the fits at the end kind of make sense because, well, those teams are already pretty good. And like Jeff, you said, they almost become luxury picks. I mean, you're the Buccaneers and you had a chance. You're flipping a coin between Jason Owe, Jalen Phillips, Gregory Rousseau, all Basham, 4 really good edge rushers. So the Bucs are going to make out in terms of, because they did such a good job in the offseason. And let's circle back to the Niners. I think because the Niners did what they did in the offseason, they're not painted into a quarter after this number 3 pick. After this number 3 pick, they can legitimately go with top corners. They can get Stokes out of Georgia in the second round. If it falls like this and you have 4 of these edge rushers sitting there early in the second round, you can take one of these guys to rotate into your defensive line. I think that goes to what you were talking about right before the mock draft, Jerry, when we were talking about the Niners roster, as one of these guys can be better than some of their guys that they have on the roster. So one of these guys can supplant Kevin Givens, type of thing on the defensive line because of his potential, because of his physical acumen. So it's going to be fun to see. It's going to be interesting to dissect, and it's going to be a lot to have to digest in a short amount of time, because when you're the Niners and you pick number 3, there's a long time to wait. Now, hopefully Lynch and Kyle are wheeling and dealing and at least taking phone calls and looking to see what they can do. I would love for them to do what Larry Krueger mentioned and get up to, into the late 20s for Najee Harris. We'll have to see what happens. But anything that stands out on our mock draft, whether it be surprise picks that you thought went either way too early or too late, anybody who didn't go in the first round who you thought, is a surprise?
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier. I was surprised that Christian Barmore would be going in the top 10. I think that, I really like Merrick, the safety. But I'm just wondering, in terms of the Ravens, after losing Matthew Judon and Yannick Ngakoue, do they need edge rushers, or do they have guys kind of, in the queue ready to go?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that was a consideration, not being super familiar with their roster and what their need was at that point. I echo what Jerry was saying. Also, I was surprised with Barmore at that spot. I hadn't seen him mock drafts. I've looked at as well. He's late first type thing. But that's what's always interesting about the draft. There's always a guy or two that you didn't even hear of that gets drafted 10, 15, something. It's like, who's this guy? Why did this guy get picked? So other than that, yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Barmore, and it goes to looking at just the draft, our mock draft in general, 32 picks, only one defensive lineman. Everybody else who would qualify as a defensive lineman is an edge rusher. There are no defensive tackles that are looked on as valuable. But if you ask the teams who have the good ones, they're indispensable. So I would agree. I think Barmore was a bit of a reach. And I will say it was going to be him or Surtain. And you're right, Jerry. Jerry Jones loves his flair and his pick, so that might be it. The picks that I thought I was very interested to see where Caleb Farley went, and I thought 20 was probably a perfect pick in terms of location for him. I was interested to see if Devontae Smith was going to go ahead of Jalen Waddle. Personally, I think Waddle's actually going to be the better pro, which is why I took him at Detroit. The Colts, I think, are in a tough position because they are in need of an offensive tackle. I thought taking Tevin Jenkins there was more of a pick for need rather than a best player available. But when you're the Colts, there wasn't, in my opinion, someone who is outstanding left on the board. And I do wonder about the number of wide receivers, as we had, 6 of them? Well, depending on how you qualify. I mean, Pitts is a tight end, but that is an overwhelming amount of offensive skill positions that went in this mock draft. So I hope you enjoyed the exercise, because as I was going through it before, since our last podcast, you're starting to see rosters. You're starting to see who's thin where. You're starting to see who has an abundance of, say, pass rushers, but that's kind of who lines up when it comes to the draft. So it's interesting to see how this all plays out. It'll obviously be interesting to see how it plays out 8 days from now when the draft kicks off. So I'm excited. It's our first mock draft special. We set the table real nice for Roger Goodell and all the teams. Our consulting fees are very low for anyone who wants to, contact us
Right.
for our input. But to put a bow on it, Jerry, what are your final thoughts? Because the next time we podcast, the Niners will have made their selection at number 3.
Well, I guess kind of piggybacking on what you were saying just a short while ago about how I think wide receiver and even cornerback, it's pretty deep. It's pretty deep in this particular draft class. So, as much as we've talked about needing to address the defensive backfield, maybe in the second round, as high as the second round, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they waited till later. Like, let's say if a Wyatt Davis, the guard out of Ohio State, was available with their number 43 pick in the second round, I could see the Niners grabbing him. And, waiting on, like I said, in maybe in the day 3, even guys, local guys around the Bay Area, like Paulson Adebo from Stanford or Cameron Bynum from Cal, right? Those cornerbacks could still be available. Shakur Brown, Michigan State, Benjamin St. Juste out of Minnesota, right? And then even in terms of receivers, like, the Niners are going to need a slot receiver, but there's a lot of them out there. A couple of guys would be like Jalen Darden from North Texas. We have can't remember Cade Johnson out of South Dakota. I mean, there's just a number of them that could be available in the later rounds. So I kind of see. I wonder if that might be their strategy. But look, needless to say, this is the most important draft of the Shanahan-Lynch era, specifically as it pertains to that number 3 pick. So, hey, one more week, and we'll finally know what the Niners have been cooking up this whole time, and I can't wait.
All right, it's your last chance, Jerry. Who are they taking at number 3?
I told you already. Trey McCorkle Fields. Oh, all right. If I had to make a choice, if I had to predict, I would say Trey Lance. That's who I predict.
Jeff, final thoughts.
Yeah, and I'd say it just goes to show, going through all this, it's all about the quarterback, right? There's so many other positions, but it's all about the quarterback and getting the quarterback right. I debated this all day as far as like who to take in this mock draft, and I can't go. What am I gonna do? And then Jerry messed me up anyway, and because who I was gonna take was Trey Lance. I came to the conclusion it's gonna be Trey Lance. All those guys at his pro day, he's probably got the biggest upside. He can sit behind Jimmy. He's got tree trunks for legs. He can break tackles. He had a a similar style at North Dakota State. He's young. He's got a hell of an arm, which I really want a big arm watching some of these other guys throw the ball. I can't have that, floating duck or I can't throw it deep. Like, we got to get a guy with an arm, for this new generation of NFL talent. So as much as I thought it was Mac Jones at first, I can't see it now. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if they went Mac Jones or Fields. The one thing, I guess, about Fields I heard today, I never heard this before, about him dealing with epilepsy. So I'm not sure if that's going to scare teams off and make him slide down boards. I don't know if you guys heard that. So yeah, I would say Trey Lance. And then from there, yeah, it's all about the quarterback. So that's what I'd like to see the Niners take at that spot. And that'll obviously shake up everything. Then who do the Falcons take? Do the Broncos trade up? The Patriots trade up? On and on. So I think most of the guys we mentioned, though, are probably going to be first rounders, I would say.
Yes, and I think I'll make it a trifecta. If I'm in the prediction business, if I had to pick right now, I think the Niners take Trey Lance. So, I mean, sorry, Niner fans, we just jinxed it. That's absolutely who they will not be picking. I think we all agree on it. But I would also, for all those reasons you just said, I think he'd look great. I think he'd look great in a Niner uniform. I'm excited for the prospect of watching him play. I'm excited for the prospect of seeing what they do with Jimmy Garoppolo, if indeed he does stay on the roster. If he makes it to training camp, he's going to make it to opening day, because who's really going to make a trade unless there's a devastating injury late in training camp to get, a proven pro. So if it's Trey Lance, maybe you do keep Jimmy, and you keep Jimmy there until he either, plays himself out of the starting job or gets hurt. But my final thought really is how exciting it has been over these past 4 or 5 months to work on this podcast, to talk with you guys, to get the feedback from listeners, to hear things. And I've never been more excited than to see a picture that I saw a few days ago. One Mr. Jeff Krupinski has 3 Side Sports swag. It's unbelievable. Look at that. For those of you watching on YouTube, that is the shirt that you need. That is the shirt that you want. So all of this draft talk has now come down to secondary to the wardrobe du jour. So we've talked so much about quarterbacks. We've talked so much about draft picks. We've talked so much about what the Niners need to do. It's not now time to close the book and let them do it. So thank you, everybody. For Jerry, for Jeff, thank you for listening to our mock draft edition of 3 Side Sports Talk. We will let you know when the merch drops and you're available to pick up a shirt that Jeff has. Until next time, we will talk to you the night of the first round and talk about the first round draft pick. 1, maybe 2, we'll find out. For 3 Side Sports, good night.